Okay, so today we'll get into chapter 3. It's talking about managing and leading. And I will pull up the screen share here in just a second and get that set up. Actually, let me check this one message. Nope. Is everybody doing okay, hanging in there pretty good? This class is actually the one thing that's gives me a little bit of sanity right now because it's the closest thing to normal that I've got this semester, you know. Other than my online class that I'm teaching, which is kind of just runs like a normal online, but at least I got one where I have actual people, because it's when we start working more on some of these projects and things that we want to do, you know, working, trying to find internship sites, maybe looking at our web page of the therapeutic recreation program when we're talking about marketing. It'll be a lot more fun to do something like that with all of us in here where we can throw ideas around and share things. So that's what I hope to get out of that as we move along. And like I said, I'm going to front load the class right now up front, and we're going to get to right on through chapter 7 pretty quickly. Boom, 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 and then we'll go ahead and get one test out of the way. Then maybe have a class or two where we do some of that extracurricular stuff to, you know, that applies to management, marketing, networking, things like that, and then we'll jump back in rolling along. That's kind of my plan going forward. Open. Oh, that's the problem. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And I'm pretty sure that last time when I did this, that the slideshow didn't run through as I was doing it on the recording. It just stayed on that page that I was just at. So if that happens again, or whoever has to watch this, you can go back through and follow along with the PowerPoints on Blackboard while I'm talking. Just print a copy or something. So this chapter, you know, we talked about first line managers the first couple classes. Now we're moving into chapter 3, which is about managing and leading. And there are commonalities there and there are differences there between managing and leading, and we'll get into some of that. As we had in 262, just this week actually, we talked about, in the last class, we talked about the history, you know, where we talk about Jane Addams, Florence Nightingale, and the different eras, and Hull House, and all of that good stuff, and how theories changed, and how therapeutic recreation should be delivered, and there were different groups that wanted to be the head of the gang, and all that good stuff. But basically, like I told them, it's not my favorite content, but it's important content. Number one, history is important because it shows you kind of where you came from, and we learn from things that happen along the way. Also, some of this material for those that want to go the CTRS route, probably not as much specific names, but some of this material of the history could be on the CTRS exam. So for that reason alone is enough reason to cover this chapter pretty well, as much as it's not as fun as some of the others. So there were different eras of management and management theory. Now, what's another word or another way to put theory? What would you call a theory? Hypotheses? Is that basically, they're kind of broad constructs, different pathways based on certain ideas. So there's, during each one of these eras that are listed below, the classical, behavioral, human relations, and modern eras, there were different trends in how they thought management should be done. And we'll go through here and talk about kind of what happened and when these eras are. This is a touchy little mouse, so I got to remember to use the space bar. Okay, so the classic era is, as it says here, was from the 1880s to the 1930s. So obviously that's kind of, if you try to think, when did therapeutic recreation come to be? In that 1880s to 1930s is kind of when it started to become a thing. Not certified, but they started to see the benefit in providing therapeutic services to people who, you know, that there were benefits that could be gained from recreation, basically, is what they started to see at that point. So it was prompted by the Industrial Revolution. Why do you think that would be? What was everybody doing all the time during the Industrial Revolution? Working. So all work and no play is a bad combination, right? So that's kind of what they started to realize, what it comes down to. So this management theory during the classic era is divided into two approaches. There's scientific management and general administrative practices. And then these key contributors here, we'll talk about them by name: Taylor, Fayol, and Weber, as we move forward. So Frederick Taylor's 4 principles of scientific management. Basically, it doesn't go, but you know, when you think scientific, you think of like a lab and you think of things like that. It's not really that. It's just going by scientific principles when making choices, kind of. Base work methods on scientific study of tasks. So you look at what has to be done and actually do. It's kind of like doing a task analysis where you break down exactly what somebody has to be able to do to do that. So once you've done that, you realize what kind of person you need to fill that role. Then from there, you scientifically select, train, and develop each worker. So you kind of, by those task portions that you've pulled together at this stage, you find people and you mold them into your perfect worker, is kind of the way I read this second part. You know, scientifically select, train, and develop each worker. So you're just kind of molding them to do that job. Cooperate with workers to be sure that scientifically developed methods are followed. Basically overseen at that point. Divide work responsibility almost equally between the managers and the workers performing the task. So managers during this stage were right there in the middle of everything, which I don't disagree with that in large part. Anybody ever worked somewhere where you felt like the supervisor was basically in their office and didn't even really know what was going on? I think most everybody's been in situations kind of like that. Now, a lot of times I can say that sometimes you don't know what all they're having to do in there, but a lot of times supervisors are just kind of locking themselves away from reality, and that's not a good route to go. I think being out there, even if you're not dividing work responsibilities with the workforce, as a manager, when you're out there and you're among them, and then you're seen as part of the team and you're more respected and you get more results, and you're able to do the most important thing to me is to actually give positive statements to your employees, you know, if you're actually present and seeing what's going on. Let me make sure I didn't go to here. No, yes, I did. Okay. Henri Fayol, 5 functions of managers. And I think this is valid. I can see all of these being things that need to be there. Planning, organizing. Now, commanding is a little strong. And that's why this was back, you know, in earlier times. Commanding is a very strong word. Coordinating and then controlling sounds a little strong as well. But these were the 5 functions of managers in his eyes as far as theories go. We do know that managers have to be able to plan. We know that they have to be able to organize. Delegation would be a better word probably for number 3, or the more effective way to do it. Coordinating, you need to be able to put the pieces together to work best to meet the goals of the facility where you're working. And controlling, that's kind of like just oversight. You need to be providing oversight where you can give input on whether or not people are meeting the goals they're supposed to be meeting as therapeutic recreation workers. So then he broke it down into 14 different principles of management. And some of these will, you know, kind of ring a bell with you. Division of labor, that's how you spread the work around to your employees. Authority, where is the line of authority? As a manager, it depends on which level of management you are at. You know, if you're at the first line or if you're higher up on that triangle that we had in the last class. Talked about authority, discipline, unity of command. That basically is going to refer to not getting information from, you know, if there's multiple managers, not having one tell you this is how we're doing it and another one come in and tell you, no, this is how we're doing it. Getting contradictory information. So you need that unity of command and unity of direction. I'm not going to go deep into these others because they're a little deeper than we want to go into history. They're not really terms that we use anymore at this point. Now, order is, you know, important, and that doesn't necessarily mean doing things 1, 2, 3, 4 in an order. It just, to me, it means keeping things in an orderly fashion, keeping things organized and running the way that they should. Equity is just basically, what's another word for equity? Partially, that's it. But to me, when I think of equity, think of also fairness when you're talking about in the workplace. But you're exactly right. Equity is what you're going to get out of it, and what you should get is fair treatment from the top. Initiative, that's another one that applies and I think is important. And different employees have different levels of initiative, and part of that as a manager is, you know, what can I do to improve initiative levels in the employees? How can I get them to want to do more? Max Weber, 6 characteristics of bureaucracies. I told you when we started, this is not the most exciting information. This is kind of historical things that we went through. Division of labor, again, that was on a prior one. You need to divide it appropriately and fairly. There's a hierarchy of authority, formal selection, formal rules and regulations. I think that is something that still does apply. Impersonality, career orientation. So you're giving people the proper training up front. You know, when you come to Ole Miss, first thing you do is go to orientation. And in a nutshell, what are you doing at orientation? You're finding out how this thing works. Where's everything at? What do I do? What's the next step? And that's kind of what career orientation is referring to when you come into a new work facility. The management theory. This is during the behavioral era, occurred during the 1930s and the 40s. So it was influenced by the Depression. So you know what kind of shape the country was in at that point, not the best. There were labor relations legislations that came about at this point. It focused on why people do different things. And we'll talk about Mayo, Follett, and Barnard next. So Mayo did some Hawthorne studies at the Western Electric Hawthorne plant. And if you're just looking at this slide, you might be confused a little bit about what we're talking about. The purpose was to study the impact of illumination on productivity. When it says illumination, we're not, even though they're at the Western Electric Hawthorne plant, you're probably thinking how many lights are on. That was not the study. Illumination in this study was basically positive reinforcement, praise, prize, some sort of recognition for doing a good job. And what they found was, regardless of what the researchers did to provide this positive reinforcement, worker productivity increased. So what does that tell you? Almost any kind of recognition for doing a good job in the workplace is going to bring about positive change in your workers. You're going to see more productivity. And it was found to be more effective than pay increases in productivity increases. When someone actually feels valued, they're going to work harder for you. Now, a lot of these things that we're talking about, yes, this is a administrative class about recreation therapy. This applies to anybody you're going to work with, any sort of management. So that still applies. Now, a lot of people that would work that way for. Some people strictly, if they can get a raise, that's what they want. They'll work harder if they get a raise. Obviously there's outliers, but still, I think for the most part, a lot of people will be more productive just because they'll be happier. When you're upset and you're mopey and you're just kind of like, I don't want to be here today, you're not getting as much done as you are than if you're just whistling and doing your thing. If you feel appreciated and glad to be there, you'll do more. So that's kind of what that study was about. So, concluded the following: acknowledgement, increased productivity, far better than financial incentives. What do you guys think? What would, if they did this study on you, would you guys have this same result, you think? if they were studying your productivity? No? kind of mixed reviews from what I'm seeing. Yeah, I mean, yes, you would love to have acknowledgement, you know, that pat on the back, good job, but you would also like some financial incentives. And I think that that has become, even though, you know, when this came about, you know, we talked about how it came along during the behavioral era, which is the 30s and 40s, and we're in the Depression, so nobody has money. There's really not a ton of things that people are going out frivolously buying at that point anyway. So you can see why during this stage, especially, the acknowledgement was more important than financial gain. If you had more money, what are you going to do with it at that point? You know, they're not putting out a bunch of vehicles and a lot of fun things to just go by. That's not how it was. So they wanted that acknowledgement that showed that people worked harder if they felt that their managers cared about them. Absolutely, I don't think there's anybody in here that would disagree with that. Work norms drove productivity by establishing a fair day's work. When you start getting mandatory overtime and asked to work, you know, 14 straight days, you're going to see declines in productivity, obviously. The informal organization affected productivity and made boring work more tolerable. That was something that they saw. Kind of gave people some flexibility is what this is amounting to. A little bit of self-direction, and that's, I always have appreciated that when, you know, as managers, you have micromanagers and which want their finger on everything you do. And when I've been in the management role, I'm somewhere right in the middle, honestly. I get out of the way, but I do tell people exactly what's expected of them up front. And I check in periodically to see how things are going. And I ask for them to report to me and tell me how things are going. I don't consider that micromanaging at all. Micromanaging is every day you're like, okay, how's it going? What are you doing? You know, like that. That's not the best route at all. So if you can actually give your employees proper training and step back, let them do their job in their most effective way, then they're going to actually improve productivity. Okay, Mary Parker Follett. She was the management prophet. It almost reads like I was about to start a poem or something there. Organization is a group of people, not just a means of production. So basically saying you don't need to look at your workers as just like your little herd of sheep that you're pushing around trying to get a task done. You need to look at them as humans. They're going to work better. Managers should lead workers rather than rely on the authority of their positions. That's kind of, in a way, saying, don't use the because I said so and do what I say, not what I do kind of thing. You need to lead by example, and that may include jumping right in with the crew and showing them how to do something. You know, spend a day on the floor working with your people. That's the best way to lead, is showing them that you're willing to get your, quote, hands dirty, and that you're willing to do your part, and showing them what you expect. You know, that if nothing else, they can see how you work and then know, well, if he or she was doing that as my supervisor, then surely that's appropriate behavior, and it gives them an idea of how to go from there. Workers need to be given greater responsibilities, and managers should be trained in management. So you kind of have specialties on both sides, you know, as workers and as managers. and both should be on an upward slope. You know, you should be moving up as much as you can, gaining more responsibilities, getting the opportunity for the best employees to move up to that first level of management at some point, and for you as a manager, once you have proven yourself where you are, to maybe have the chance to move to that next level of management. These views, it says, were virtually ignored at the time, yet today they're the basis of contemporary management thinking. You know, that's why they called her the management prophet, because even though it was still quite a while back, a lot of what she's talking about is very much in play today. Chester Barnard is someone else who talked about managers and what 3 functions of managers should be. Number 1 was motivate personnel. I think that's huge. And I think I talked about this before, and here you have to, you know, what are you guys motivated by? Let's say sports-wise, Lonnie, as far as coaching, what sort of motivation, what motivates you as a player? Does a coach getting in your face and no, that shuts you down? Yeah. Honestly, when I played, I'm the same way. I did not like the coach that got in my face and say, you missed that block, you know, whatever, and had me by the shirt or what. That just made me want to next time, you know, just get out of the way and let them sack the quarterback, you know, because I don't like somebody in my face. Now, some players get that same treatment and they go out and run over everybody on the field on the next play because that's how they get motivated. The point is, everybody has a different set of motivation and a different way that they need to be treated in order to get the most out of them. And that's part of your responsibility as a manager, is to get to know your employees enough to know how to motivate personnel. So yes, I think number 1 is a very, very important portion of management. Motivating your personnel is partially done in effect by number 2, maintaining effective communication with your personnel. So that tells me that you're spending the time to find out how things are going, what things they are doing, what's working, what is not, and they see that you actually care, you know, about what's going on. You know, taking a little bit of time to not even talk about work with your personnel is a good thing. You know, that I'm not saying, you know, there's a line between being a manager and, you know, manager and employee that needs to be there, where if you do give direction, they won't just laugh and be like, whatever. Because that's what happens to me at home with my kids, because I play with them too much. I'm the one that's not a, you know, but when I get serious, they're like, whoa, who is this guy? But when mama says, I said, let's go brush our teeth, boop, you can hear butts popping off the couch and them running to the bathroom. You know, so maybe she's the manager at home. But effective communication is going to play a big role in forming that trust, making a bond, and it plays into your employees feeling important and feeling like you care about them. Thus, that's going to improve productivity like we talked about. The third step, hire and retain quality personnel. That goes without saying, you know, the hiring process, the interview process is an important thing. And once you get somebody that is good, give them reasons to stay. You know, more responsibility, more praise, things like that. So how you treat your employees goes a long way in whether or not they're happy to be with you. You know, show them that there's ways that they're going to be able to improve their current situation and move up, go places, and they'll be much more likely to stay with you. So an organization is a behavioral system made up of individuals with interacting social networks. Long story short, there's still cliques. There's still little groups in an organization. In your recreation therapy department, you'll have, you know, if you have 10 people working for you, you know, you'll have 3 groups of 3 that hang out and do things. They do things outside of work. Then you got one person who's not really in a group that probably nobody likes because they're not in the group. So you have to realize that people have these social networks and there's nothing you can really do to change that. You just have to manage it as best you can and do things like staff development and days where you have team building and things like that. Now, I'm taking some of this historical information and trying to make it relevant to today as we're talking about it. So not necessarily straight from the book what I'm talking about on this information, but as you read the chapters, which y'all really, if you're not, prior to when we have the test, y'all need to read the chapters, okay? It's a book that's not terribly tough read. It's not terribly long chapters or anything like that. So read the stuff and it will help you when it comes test time. I can say that for sure. Sure, I didn't skip again. So then we move to the 1950s to the 1980s, the human relations era. And you see why it has the name it has. It was, you had a lot of workplace diversity growth, which is obviously a positive thing. Changing demographics, you had the civil rights movement. The stock markets were doing well. Computers were starting to become a thing. So it became the human relations era. Key contributors, Maslow and McGregor. So I'm sure you guys have seen this before, right? The hierarchy of needs. We've all talked about what people need. And, you know, starting at the bottom, your physiological things, food, water, shelter, warmth, must have, gotta have. If you don't have, you die. That's kind of the way it works. Safety, security, stability, freedom from fear. Very important. Very relevant in today's world, you know, to me, from everything we're seeing going on. Feeling of belonging and love would be next, where you got friends, family, spouse, lover. Self-esteem, achievement mastery, meaning you're good at what you do. Recognition and respect. You want to feel recognized, you want to feel respected. And then an opportunity for self-actualization, where you pursue your inner talents and creativity and look for fulfillment. It's an interesting chart, and I think overall it is relatively accurate, you know, as far as, and it's definitely accurate starting from the bottom, in that that bottom base is definitely there. That's correct. The rest you could kind of switch around, but I think Maslow was on to something here and was on a good path. So we're talking about, now we're getting closer to today's society, today's situation, and things are starting to get better. So McGregor looked at things as theory X and theory Y as far as how people were viewed. Think of this from a managerial side, you know, just from even that first line manager we talked about. You definitely, I'll put it this way, you want to be theory Y, where, you know, if you're theory X, you have a negative overall view of people. You're not giving them benefit of the doubt up front, basically. You're not saying, you're like, man, people don't like to work. This person doesn't want any responsibility. I'm going to have to watch this one close. You know, they need supervision. If I'm not here to watch them, they're not going to get anything done. Where actually, if you get out of the way and let them work, they may get more done. You know, you have to realize that. People need to be controlled to get them to perform. That's the wrong tone to be thinking in. Now, people may need guidance. People may need reinforcement to get them to perform. People need the tools to do what they're being asked to do to perform. But then you've got theory Y. This is somebody who's got some sense here. Positive view of people. Work can be enjoyed. I have been lucky in that as a practitioner when I was in the field, that I was doing something that I absolutely love to do with people that I love to do it with. And you know, everybody would say, oh, it takes a special person to work with those people at the NMRC when I was working out there. I would get that so often. And honestly, you know, I'm not tooting my own horn, but it kind of, I don't know, not necessarily a special person, but it takes someone who likes to work with that population and understands the challenges of working with certain populations. So anyway, work can be enjoyed. You know, from there, I moved to the Park Commission and was over aquatics and worked with older adults doing programming. I enjoyed that. And then honestly, being able to come here and share the things that I enjoyed doing for 20 years is very enjoyable for me. Right now, I'm a little stressed and a little over it with this coronavirus and the task, you know, the tracing team that I'm on and all that. I can't keep up, but I'm enjoying it. And I'm super glad that I'm here and able to share the things that I learned along the way. Also, another positive viewpoint that you give people up front, you know, people want, they accept and seek responsibility. You know, they want responsibility. They want to be held accountable for the things that they're supposed to be doing. And I think for the most part, that's true. You've got some people that don't fit that. You know, they won't take responsibility for anything, and there's nothing you can do about that. People can be self-directed, in contrast to people need to be closely supervised. People can be self-directed, and the executive director at the Park Commission, Seth Gaines, what he does, he has a very thorough vetting up front when you have your interviews. He finds out exactly what you know and exactly what you have done. And then when you come in, you get ample training up front to do your job. And, you know, from that point on, he basically says, all right, go do it. And unless he's getting phone calls from people complaining about your program or what you're doing a good job. Is basically what it comes down to. And there you go. People can be self-directed. They need guidance and knowledge of exactly what's expected, but they also need to be given space and room to make decisions to be as efficient as possible. Okay, in contrast to theory X, where people need to be controlled to get them to perform, people want rewards that satisfy self-actualization. They want to see their self moving up the ladder, getting recognition for good attendance at work even. You know, what do you think that's going to do? For some people, that won't matter. But somebody's going to be there that says, they just got a $500 gift card for only missing one day last year. I'm going to try to get a gift card next year. You know what I mean? Like, so it gives you, even if it's something small, the opportunity for rewards means a lot to people. I've seen people do lots of stuff for a t-shirt. I'm just saying, like, you go to, think about when they're shooting from the little cannons at sporting events. I've seen people almost die trying to get a t-shirt. So we can be motivated by small things, you know, in the scheme of life. So just remember that. I need to get this mouse off of here because I keep touching it. The systems theory came from biological theory. Use an organization as a series of interrelated parts that are dependent on each other to get things done. It sounds kind of wordy, but really if you look at what's being said there, it's very much true. You know, that's, we talk about interdisciplinary teams that work with recreation therapists in order for our clients to get the best service that they can. That's basically what this is coming down to, you know. Or in your recreation therapy department, you may have different people with different tasks in front of them. You know, you may have one group that is doing outdoor recreation, another that is works primarily with elderly patients, and some that may work with people with developmental disabilities. They're all in your organization, in your department even. They need to work together to get things done for the department. So this makes a lot of sense, even though this theory is, you know, they got to make it sound good and make it a little wordy. This is a lot of common sense on this drawing of the systems theory. You've got your environment. When someone gets input, they have a transformation process or a time where you are digesting what just happened. It makes you make a decision. This is just like psychology: antecedent, behavior, consequence. In large part, you know, that would kind of be your antecedent would be the input, let's say. Transformation process, that's basically that moment where you're deciding what to do. Output would be the behavior, and then your feedback would be the consequence. That's all this systems theory in drawing is basically saying. Now, we talked a lot about management. Let's talk a little bit more about directly with leadership. It's a process that's two-way between the leader and the group. I think that the group needs to feel involved with the process. You know, even if it's just when you're trying to teach something, if it's just saying, all right, anybody have any questions? Is that clear? Is everybody good? Any comments? You know, just that alone makes it a two-way street, you know, and not just a one-way conversation. It involves influence, how the leader affects the group. Obviously, the tone, even myself, you know, how I talk to you guys and the mood that I come in is going to influence you in class. That's why everybody loves Waddell. He's the same Waddell every time you see him. You know what I mean? Like, he never really changes. He's always goofy. He's always fun. You know, that's the Waddell. It also, when we're talking about influence, we're not just talking about how your mood affects the people that work with you. What does the leader use to be able to affect the group or to motivate the group? So leadership, what makes you the leader? Is it that you're outspoken? Or is it that you just jump in there and start doing something? Now, people lead in different ways too. Some people lead by, I mean, you ever watch the, I don't know, Survivor or some of these shows? You have the tribes, and then clearly what's going to happen relatively soon. They're not necessarily chosen by the group as a whole, but you're going to get leaders in the different tribes, you know, and they're going to influence how, you know, the dynamics of what is going on in the camp. They're going to influence how people vote. They're going to start. So there's a lot of different ways that leaders can influence a group. Leadership can occur in a group with a common purpose. It can lead to that common purpose and keep people on that same path. Involves meeting a goal to accomplish some task. Now, when that happens, regardless of whether it's a group dynamic or an individual dynamic, you have this feeling of, okay, got it done, what next? You know, when you actually are successful and you complete something, then you need a leader to help you make sure that you stay focused on meeting a goal. Planning statements. Actually, I made a note, and I want to talk a little bit about this because it was in the chapter. It wasn't, somehow missed it on the slideshow. On page 29, this is something else that you guys have heard about and I'm sure talked about before, but it's figure 3.6, and it talks about the behavior styles of leadership. And as a leader, what we're going to talk about 4 different types of leadership. One is autocratic. The next is democratic. The next is what? Who knows? Laissez-faire. And then bureaucratic. Does that ring a bell with you guys? Have y'all seen it, heard it, had it in another class or anything like that? It's just leadership styles. In autocratic setting, the leader solves the problem or makes a decision using information available to the leader at the time. Decisions are made alone. The focus is on just accomplishing the task rather than relationships. It's very useful in crisis situations. Okay, that makes sense, right? You don't have time to talk it out. You don't have time to brainstorm in a crisis situation. You have to get something done. So that's where your strong leader steps up and says, all right, this is what we're doing. We got to do it now. This is how it's going to be done. That is autocratic. There's not any conversation about how it's going to happen. And in a crisis situation, employees should understand in that situation and that situation only, to me, that would be a time when that's an appropriate leadership stance, okay? And you got democratic. The leader shares the problem with the relevant team members as a group. Together, they generate and evaluate alternatives and attempt to reach an agreement or consensus on a solution. The leader doesn't try to influence the group to adopt a solution and is willing to accept and implement the solution that has support of the entire group. This style creates a spirit of collaboration and joint effort that results in team member satisfaction. Good choice. Don't you think? You're giving people input. You're going with majority. The deal with that is hard for leaders or managers to do is to actually get out of the way in that process and not try to influence the group to what they want, because you know they've got an idea of how they want it to come out. If you want it to be actually democratic, you're not trying to quote, sway the votes, let's say. You're not campaigning. You know, this is what I think we should do, but hey, y'all just decide. They know you're their manager or leader. You think that's going to sway them if you say, you know, this is what I think, but hey, y'all tell me what you want to do. They're going to go with what you said for the most part. That's a total sway, unless you have some really, really strong people in your group that truly don't care what you're saying. Laissez-faire, this is where the leader takes a permissive style that assumes team members are mature and internally motivated and self-directed. The leader provides little or no direction or facilitation. This style promotes creativity and brainstorming. This style works really well for some people. This does not work very well for some people. And some people can be led. I'm one that can be led using this, because I don't want somebody with their finger on me asking me questions every day. I loved it at the park commission when he said, these are your expectations. I had a list of, you know, that I could check off as I was getting them done. These are your expectations. This is what needs to happen. You can just report back to me once a month and let me know how this is going. I'm like, perfect. He left me alone. My programs were improved. They ran well. I was motivated because I didn't have somebody with their foot on my neck, you know, watching me and tapping me on the shoulder every day. I don't know. That works for me. Doesn't work for some people. Some people, if they don't have the self-direction or motivation and don't really care what they look like as a manager, that's not going to work. They're going to need more direction. Bureaucratic. The leader relies on policy and rules to identify goals and direct work processes. It's based on a lack of security and trust in themselves and the follower, or based on this leader exercises power by applying fixed, inflexible rules and avoids decision-making without formal standards. It ensures that the same policies are applied to every situation. Pluses and minuses to this one, in my opinion. Yes, you do need to have set rules, and your facility is going to have expectations and rules that need to be followed. So do you need to go by those? Yes. Are there going to be exceptions? Do you need to account for personal differences and situations that arise? You know, you got 2 students that aren't here right now because they're at the end of their quarantine period. Doesn't mean that they've had COVID or, you know, when they get here, they're not going to be transmissible anyway. But I'm just saying we got a couple people that are out because they've been asked to quarantine. According to rules, if I haven't seen them, I'm supposed to mark them absent. I've heard from both of them. I'm not marking them absent. That's right there is me not being bureaucratic in this situation. I'm not going strictly by the rule book, because there are situations that are worthy of breaking free from those strict rules. And that's why this one is not. There's some rules that do not need to be stretched, do not need to be broken, do not need to be tampered with, that are, you know, if it's somewhere that says no firearms on the facility, you know, at the facility, and you come to work one day and you have a gun sticking out of your pocket, you're probably going to get fired that day. Just saying, you know, situations like that, yes, bureaucratic. You go by the book, you go by the rules, you go by, you know, most places where you work, they have different levels of, gosh, the word is leaving me right now. When you get in trouble, you get called in for meetings, you know, with your supervisor. So they have like a type 1 or level 1, level 2, level 3 offenses. And for a level 1, you're supposed to have a meeting, interview, and document it in their file. For a level 2 offense, they get 1 day leave without pay, and they're expected to be back. They also get a written reprimand in their file. Level 3 can be termination, you know, like things like that. Those are things that are going to be bureaucratic and things that you follow by the book, because if you don't and you terminate someone and they go back and they found that you weren't following that to a T, you could have a lawsuit for not following that. So that's a situation where you are need to be autocratic and bureaucratic with a situation like that. If there's some sort of situation where someone is having, you know, being demoted or is in trouble for something that's happened at work. Okay, planning statements. And we are almost done, which is good because we're running out of time. It goes up the steps. We've got objectives, goals, mission, and vision. Objectives are actions or strategies taken to achieve the organization's goals. Now, this is for your organization, and think of this in managerial terms, not as in a practitioner, okay? But you see that there's still goals. Now you really see how important goals and objectives are, because they even move into management. The objectives are the actions or strategies to be taken to achieve the goals of the organization. The goals are statements of near-term desired outcome for the organization. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to get done. We would like to, you know, put on a golf clinic for teens. You know, we would like to have a movie night for individuals with Down syndrome. I'm just throwing stuff off the top of my head. Now, then you get to the mission. It identifies the organization's basic business and purpose. You know, our mission is to provide quality care to individuals with developmental disabilities and while allowing them to have as much direction in their life as possible, self-direction. And then you've got the vision, which is just the description of a desired state for the organization. We strive to be the best provider of therapeutic services in Lafayette County. You know, you would have more details in there, but it's a broad statement of where you want the organization to be. Now, we talked about objectives. You've all seen this. And it was in there and just not bad to review. We know what SMART objectives are. Remember this little acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related. I think specific is very, very important in that they, you know, need to know what's expected. Measurable, was it done or was it not? Did you meet it? Achievable, it needs to be, you know, you need to reach for the stars, but you need to reach for the star that you can actually reach. Don't reach for the one at the farthest point of the galaxy right off. That also plays into realistic. You know, it needs to be something that is achievable and realistic, and you need to give a deadline as a manager. You know, when are we gonna determine whether we have achieved our objective to find a new one? So that is it for chapter 3. Anybody have anything, any questions, issues? from that. Otherwise, let's keep plugging along and to go in next time on just chapter 4. Like I say, I want to knock a lot of this book work out and then get into some more interactive things once we get through some of this meat. Thank you guys for your attention. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Kelly, at least I'll see you later. Yeah. Yeah. I think I already sent out the invitation. That's. Mm-hmm. Well, good deal. I'll see you this afternoon.
With my textbook, I just